What's up, guys? It's November 29th, Friday, 2019. Um, I've got this. This is going to be our first podcast, first podcast lecture discussion. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to describe what the podcast and future discussions will be about. And so this week's topic is the Buddha. And so what the Buddha taught, or what the Buddha saw. But what's Buddhism anyways, right? Let's start there. Buddhism is currently labeled by a majority as a religion. However, from what I see, it's a way of living. What I've experienced in the past, we can probably say 10 whole months and 3 days, approximately, counting from January 26th. What I've been experiencing these past 10 months. I've listened to different audiobooks. Not so much read them myself, but I've listened to different audiobooks, and the book that described Buddhism was, or is, to this current point in time, the most accurate description of what I'm experiencing, what I see, what I feel, what I know, and how I know to go about things. It's been quite the experience, and so it's funny that what I'm experiencing was written over 2,000 years ago. I believe about 600 BC. So in those 2,000 years, the brain hasn't changed. That's to say, we can't necessarily say it's technology or global warming or whatever our current issues are that any of those are the cause for the current unconsciousness epidemic. I made that up. I wasn't sure what to call it. But essentially what the Buddha described is being conscious of what you do, what you feel, what you say, everything regarding you and your interactions with the world around you. And so you might think, oh, so what? That's a big deal. I'm like that all the time, and I would counter argue that you're not, because we can first start with, are you aware of your breath and your heart rhythm right now? And if you're not, you probably just tuned into them to listen to them, or to start even looking for them if it's difficult for you to find. But that's to say, a current majority of people are not entirely in tune with their body, which is actually where it all starts. You become in tune with your body, you become in tune with how it reacts to the world, and then you're in tune with how you respond to those different interactions, whether you tasted something, or you got hit, or you're trying to sing. You know, you're dealing with all your five senses. But anywho, It's an epidemic that continues to plague the human species, we'll say, because this is something the Buddha attempted to address 2,000 years ago. So we're I don't know if we're still considered in the industrial age or maybe some information technology age, the way we're incorporated with computers. But it's a thinking pattern. It's a way of interacting with the world that's not necessarily correct. And it causes human suffering. Okay? So, what the Buddha taught begins with the Four Noble Truths. And I don't know all of them off the top of my head. That's to kind of even show you how deep I am into it, which is really, maybe toe deep, not even knee deep. Because I don't think I'm going to go down the path of reading all their scriptures and stuff like that. There's not going to be enough time in my lifetime to review lifetimes of work and translations, or even to attempt to learn the original language in order to get the most authentic interpretation of the text. That's not something I feel like there's enough time on this earth to do, and that we need to take the gist of things, so to say, because we're not going to relive the entire past, but we need to take the lessons learned and apply them to modern day. Now, I am not the only one who has seen what the Buddha saw. There's apparently, I would say hundreds, because I haven't seen thousands of unique names, but I think I've seen maybe nearly upwards of 100 different names of enlightened individuals. Or even if I would consider them not entirely enlightened, they were awakened to this perspective of living. Because it's very hard to detach from it when everybody else around you is so involved in it. And so that's, again, the human suffering. The human suffering, it comes from want. I think it's better called desire. You may say you need something, but at the heart of it, it's most likely a desire. Now, that's not to say, oh, well, I need water to survive. No, okay. Yeah, that's a fact. That's not. I mean, you'll probably desire water, which can be at a root of all evils. If you imagine 5 people in a room, no food, no water, except one canteen in the middle. They're all gonna desire that water, and it's gonna become a problem where greed kicks in. Okay, so anyways, you play that out, you put yourself in that scenario, I'm sure you're gonna say, well, it's live or die. I need water to survive, and I need the most water to live the longest. Um, that in itself is one of the root of all problems. And that's survival. Um, our culture has a very big fear of death, um, and that all of our actions are almost not necessarily in a way to survive, but we feel it contributes to our survival. Take, for example, our education system. You need to graduate high school, go to college, so you can survive in the adult world, with good financials. And at some point, I think I can speak for a majority of us, we lost sight of, okay, that's a way of living, but that's not the only way of living. And that's because we're in a box. And so I grew up in the United States, which is, that we'll call that my box. So I don't know what the school systems and other way of lives are outside of this country. I have an idea from media. I don't have an idea from experience. And at this point in my life, I understand how media is put together, whether it's edited, cut and pasted together, certain details left out, da 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 da. Or, if it's like the news, where certain perspectives of an event are focused on, and only one side of the story, or even the blind side on the wrong side of the story. um it's all it's all one perspective. Anyways, it's all one perspective. um and so you need to be outside the box to see different things, and experience them sensory wise, not read about it, which sure that activates your eye sensors, or if you listen about it, but you need to be there in first person. But that's all goes back to, what, and I might just be describing the way I misinterpreted the education system's intentions of teaching me in the United States. But I essentially lived my life thinking money equals survival. And I eventually reached the breaking point where that's where what puts me here today. And that I'm starting this podcast. Our first topic is Buddhism, and relating that to what I've experienced. So, the need to survive is a form of suffering, in conclusion. Um, Suffering also by attachment, um, uh, identifying with things. So let's say attachment, a personal property of yours is damaged, and you get mad. Anger itself is suffering, because now you've worked yourself into tension over something that's done, essentially. So let's just say a car accident. Boom, cars crash, you get out, driver starts yelling, all mad, whatever, right? At this point, he's not contributing to the situation other than essentially being a baby in the middle of the road crying about his property damage. Because let's be real, that's all it is at the end of the day. I'm a car enthusiast. I can understand a car enthusiast's car could be essentially like their baby. Um, it's still no excuse to fly off the handle. But that's not to say your feelings are wrong. Um, because you can have those feelings and not suffer from them. You just need to identify them. So, how would you do that with anger? If you see anger arising, you can let that little bit of energy out with the tone of your voice, not to scream at it, not to demean anybody. But if you feel like you gotta yell it because of the urgency of the situation, you yell it. That happens. But you don't sit there after you say what you wanted to say with your heartbeat prompted for action, so to say. Because yelling is essentially I would even call it like an animal mechanism. Like sorry, a dog barks when there's a need to. Otherwise, my dogs at least are quiet 98% of the time. And so, as a human, our ability to raise our voice, we don't yell at each other on a daily basis, right? We just yell when there's some type of urgency. So anyway, that's to say when you're activated, when that unconscious side of you is activated, that you're expending energy that's not needed. And I guess at the end of the day, what the Buddha saw, what I see, is essentially a way to conserve energy towards endeavors and efforts that align with your greater good, your greater being. I don't believe there's a second you or second me, but at some point we all identify something that aligns with our life, a passion, and not playing into I work a 9 to 5 because that's what I was told to, so that's what I do. I mean, you got to step out the box. But anyways, that's another discussion. But once you can see the root of the suffering, you're able to see things differently, go about things differently, take action or not take action on things. It all adds up to a painless life. These past 10 months of my life have been so calm. And there's been times, I've been, I'll say aroused in anger. Like we got a puppy during these 10 months. And, we're potty training her, and I will say it's been challenging. But, that's, you gotta look at things as, teacher. Everything's a teacher in your life. So I identified that the dog spoiling the floor boils something in me. Not to say boils my blood, but it's a trigger for some anger of, hey, you're wasting my time. Now I have to clean this poop. And me. Now me this. I gotta do that. You did this, and I'm the one left cleaning it. It's essentially another form of crying. So you can see I've identified it. Now, once you identify something, okay, well, what do? Do you get rid of the dog? No. It's with this perspective of living, you're 100% control in your life. At least of the things you are conscious of. If you're unconscious about it, it takes people different amounts of times and it's different per subject, because once you awaken to this fact, you go through this process with everything. From how you hold your phone, how you walk, how you sit. It's an awareness that you bring into every aspect of your life. Okay, feeling your breath. Was that a short breath? Was that a long breath? Was it a deep breath? Was it a shallow breath? don't get lost in the classification, and I'm sorry for presenting it that way. I meant to come up with different terms and not two different terms per each end of that spectrum. But anyways, it's once you know, it's crazy. I've lived 31 years, 32 years of my life tomorrow. No, we can say 31. 31 years and 3 months of my life unconscious. Now, as a baby and a child, I was probably conscious to things before social conditioning happened, and I think that's for everybody. I would say a baby is the most pure form of a human, even though it would seem that they have no IQ. Um, the sensory pleasure as a mammal, not the sensory pleasure, but the sensory interaction as a mammal. Okay, I touched that hurt. Um, the baby already at that point, it's not, it's putting things together as in, okay, oh, that hurt. Not most likely won't do that again. We could probably say. Um, dealing with like even peekaboo. You can see my face. Now you can't. And that's a game because it engages their eye perception, and so while they're not making out what's going on, they can tell I see something, I don't. I see it, I don't. And the inflection in the voice makes it funny or whatever it might do. It might scare them. And so that's itself, how the baby reacts is consciousness to its basic level, and which I guess for past 2,000 years in our societies and cultures, we somehow automatically tune those. We filter them out, and so I could probably give you an example of filtering really well in that I did a cabin stay for 5 days in the woods recently. Very quiet. Wasn't 100% secluded from noise pollution, I'll say, because there was still, I could hear like Jake brakes and really loud bikes in the distance. Not loud from my location, but I could still hear them echoing off in the distance like an airplane in the sky. But when I got back, um, I had to go pick my daughter up from the bus, and just all the different cars going by, I could hear, for the first time ever, the different sets of tires on each vehicle around in the vicinity of myself. So there could be like 6 different cars driving by. I don't just hear road noise. I hear all 6 vehicles and their different tire noises. So it's been a few weeks since that cabin stay, and so my mind has learned to readjust to that and not hone into it. Essentially, it's kind of gone unconscious. Not to say unconscious as in the epidemic world problem of unconsciousness, but it's not a factor when I go down to the bus stop that needs to be honed in on, at least in my perception. Now, I could tune into it, except I don't know. Maybe that's something in my path that I don't fully understand yet. You know, should I be 100% conscious of that? And so that would probably even equate to some cool, like I used to. There was some movie back in the day. It showed how. It didn't show, but it wasn't like a power, but the guy could walk into a room and just by glance count all the people. Not sit there and count them, but take a visual picture, walk out. He knows there's 5 people in there. there was something on the table, blah blah blah. I as we were as I was discussing this earlier, I was thinking, oh well, maybe that is a super, not like a superpower, but something, a discipline. So it'd be sound sensory discipline to, like if you walk into Chuck E. Cheese, you hear 20 different conversations, but you don't listen in on them, but you make note of it. That'd be pretty cool in my eyes. Because I actually started trying to get into speed reading, which kind of equates to the room example of when the CIA agent walks in and can take note of everything he just saw without sitting there and counting and identifying. But anyways, that could be another subject if anybody wants to go into application of super consciousness, we can call it. Just leave a comment or send an email request. But yeah, so suffering, and I often go off on tangents like this, but back to suffering. The Four Noble Truths, and this is how simple Buddhism is. I don't have to tell you no story of God, no story of Jesus, no story of Allah, and forgive me, I don't know all the different religions' primary characters. I guess I knock out quite a few when I say Jesus or God. And excuse me. Sorry. Messing with stuff while we're talking here. But anyways, it's a way of living without suffering. And so you might not think when you're unhappy to something happening, like walking out to a door ding on your car. Now that may have ruined your day, or just for that brief moment caused you, maybe it was like literally the next day after that you walked off the dealer floor with it, and boom, nice door dent plus scratch. And so your momentary reaction to it, even that brief moment of unhappiness, is suffering itself. And so this is not to say everybody needs to correct their way of living, and this is where it's weird, but it's an alternative, really great way of living, in my eyes. And apparently what the religions saw and felt like they needed to document, because I believe all religions are essentially of the same story. So that's to say they may call things different, by different names, different character names, but essentially they're all describing a coming of consciousness, coming to realization about all. And I mean, what are you? They might not all say it's suffering, but it is suffering at its heart. It's at its heart. These religions are describing a way of living so that you don't suffer. And Buddhism, I told you what it is. It's like, of course you would need to read or listen to some of it, or the summary of all of it. I don't really know if there's a like a Bible, because I know there are sets of doctrines from the Buddha, but I don't know if there's a central book. But there, and he would tell you things in weird ways, but it's simple English, not confusing mystical English, like thou shall, or just old ways of talking. And I say mystical because you have to wonder, why did they used to write thou shall? That's mysterious. Okay, so I maybe mysterious, but not mystical language. But yeah, it's all describing how to come to terms with this stuff. Uh, so that's what the podcast is going to be about, is enlightenment and awareness. I want to bring awareness to self-awareness. I want to bring awareness to enlightenment. I want to bring awareness to this way of life where, for example, for me, it I was living life so wrong. I mean, because I would say at this point, yeah, it was a 180 now compared to then. I'm on the opposite side of, if we have to put it on a spectrum, I'm on the opposite side of it. Um, and that brings me to an identification of something I'm unclear of. Okay, and so what? Nah. So let me. It's. I kind of want to say what's so wrong with living unconscious. Um, because you could go your entire life unconscious to this perspective of living, and that's perfectly fine too. So I don't want to bring this to light as you gotta do this or you're living wrong. Um, I want to bring it to light as a, like the Buddha did. Put it out there. Put it out there for those who go searching, that they felt like or feel like there still is something more to life than working and being a family guy and whoever you might identify as in society. Um, there's a connection past the physical world to an entire universe, that we all come from, and you can tune into it. Um, I, as I say that, I envision a motherly figure caressing a baby, uh, and that the world is what we make it. If you feel like you have a bad life, that's because you look at it that way. Um, and kind of, this is funny in light of the recent holiday yesterday, Thanksgiving. Um, count your blessings. If you're in a shit show, look at the brighter side of things. At least I have a home to go to, or family, or an animal, a pet. Um, you might have lost your job, but for that present moment, you don't worry about the future. At that present moment, you lost your job, you still have your house, your car, unless it's some kind of extreme scenario, right? But just say that was the only event that happened to you. You still have everything else. It is literally not the end of the world. So, depending on how you react to that loss of a job, if you let it, and this is a whole different subject of itself, but sayings in life that I've heard that make so much more sense now. If you get knocked back up, oh, sorry, if you get knocked down, get back up again. So to me, I used to say, yeah, it was almost like an easier said than done thing. Yeah, I know that's what I'm supposed to do, but why don't I do it? And so that's to say, when you get fired from a job or whatever, how long are you gonna lull on it before you go get another job? Okay, this is what consciousness brings to light, and for some people, that simple fact or scenario, if they were put into it, would know how to react based on experience or a clarity of knowing what they want in life. But for I say most of us, not me at this point, but I used to be there. Um, it would put a dent in our life. I got somebody like me who takes pride in their work. If I would have let back then, if I were to let my bosses down and gotten fired from it, I would have felt like a complete failure. Um, and so that again, who knows how long I would loll around on that. Because even though I know when you get knocked down, you got to get up again, keep fighting, whatever those sayings along those lines are. But I didn't know how to do it. Like I knew the words, I didn't know the meaning of the words. And so this enlightenment, which I don't identify as a Buddhist, but I bring this, I start this as our first topic because it's something readily out there. I'm sure I could go and look for other sources of the original source of enlightenment, because I'm pretty sure the Buddha probably heard something back then that made him go search for how to end suffering. Because they people practice asceticism, and so I don't believe, and like the Buddha doesn't believe, asceticism will bring one to 100% enlightenment, but it could awaken them. Um, but it's tough. That's tough stuff. That's depriving yourself of something you want, and not to say want in a bad way, but like when you fast, it's a necessity for life. You deprive yourself of something from food, and so um, there's I'm sure there's a story that predates the Buddhas, but then I might send people off looking for, the only one of only two links in Google search results regarding the subject matter. Whereas you can look up Buddhism and bam, it's like you just Googled God or Allah, Christianity, Hinduism. Um, and it's basic. It's so weird, and it's not necessarily weird, but it's so ironic that somebody would find this, put it in plain text, so to say, not like hieroglyphs, but their language at the time, text, write it down, and it still be relevant 2,600 years later, whatever the actual time period is. I I don't want to sit here in awe or amazement of that fact, but let it sink in. Um, it people, and so I don't know enlightened modern figures. I do, like Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra. Um, I mean, just you watch videos of them, you can hear it in their voice, and it might sound monotone, yeah. That's because there's no attachment to the words. And so once one's enlightened to this aspect of life, it's hard to get worked up and excited over something. Uh, it's not a bad thing. It's just a fact of life. Just so that's what I say. Just don't sit here in awe and amazement about the Buddha having done this, it's a fact of life. It's done. Um, so let's use it to better ourselves, because one of the benefits of being a species that can communicate is that we can pass information. And we are so damn good at that. Go on the internet. Okay, there's no internet for cheetahs and how to run the fastest and catch gazelles, or catch a gazelle. How to catch a gazelle in 5 seconds would be their viral videos. But anyways, that'd be funny. That'd be today. But as the human species has this ability to leave information behind. That leads to the next generation not having to learn in the copious way that the previous generations did. I don't even know if copious was the right word, but the potentially tedious, or without knowing the details, it could have been something that took to perfect hundreds of years. And now they have it and put it in one page or one scroll for the next generation. There you go. Work's done. In a way, I look at what we have here, enlightenment and self-awareness, in the similar way that, okay, and it's funny because that's what everybody's been following religion, but it's just been being preached, I believe, in the incorrect way. There's a universal incorrect interpretation of the documents, and that in itself is a conflict. Not a conflict. It's not really a conflict, but it's something that needs awareness to stop. You don't change things without awareness. So awareness is awareness is the goal, guys. I want to bring awareness, and I don't want to make anybody a Buddhist, but it's a good start. Doesn't get into any wishy-washy mystical language. In fact, it gets repetitive because the Buddha identified different emotions and things as foundational to the human self. So like lust, desire, anger, greed, envy. These are things we feel. And he breaks them down as to where they stem from, whether it's desire and I mean, essentially they all are, but desire versus attachment, and things like that. And they break down into subgroups of those emotions. And so it's weird because it was the science of the mind before there's any technology that we have. And so I say that's weird again, but it's not necessarily weird, but it's awing that that's even a possibility. So we're gonna take this point right here to stop, because I could go on forever. Let me know what you think. I will discuss not necessarily things on religion. Like, I'm not gonna do Christianity next time. But I'll find content regarding enlightenment and self-awareness. We might do mindfulness next time. Unfortunately, a lot of this we could tie back to Buddhism because there's scriptures on mindfulness and then scriptures on the different aspects of being enlightened, and we'll reference those when I'm aware of them and discussing the subject matter, because there's so much information, and I really just look up some of this stuff as I experience it versus going down rabbit holes of and like, okay, what is enlightenment? What am I supposed to feel? I never done any of that. And in fact, I didn't realize I was enlightened until 6 months, and listening to, I think, an Alan Watts lecture, or maybe it was an audio book. But at some point, I was like, they're describing me. And so I wasn't listening to like Alan Watts lectures and these audiobooks to find enlightenment, but rather to learn about it, because the general word itself I've never even Googled. So anyways, maybe we could do that next time. It's my story, which I'd like to conserve that for as long as I can, for whatever reason. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think. If it was dry, if it was boring, I don't care. I'm doing this for you guys. One negative comment means you heard me, and that's really all I care about. It could click 10 years from now for you, and I planted that seed. Um, so, again, getting that information out there, and when the time is right, the different individuals will come across it, and whether that brings them to enlightenment then, or at a later time, uh, it it's all for the greater good. This is all for the greater good, guys. I don't even look at the monetization. I guess I'm passionate about this. This is my passion, and so I wanna share it with the world. All right, thanks for listening, folks.